Okay. So we see him in this praying position. He originally had a head, but it came off. But in other versions, we do see him with his head and a special headpiece on. And Gudea seems to have created a lot of these to put in a variety of temples. So temples on top of ziggurats were known as waiting rooms, where you were waiting for the gods to appear to you. So even if you couldn't stay in the temple waiting for you, you used these sculptures, or he used these sculptures as a stand-in or as a proxy for when he couldn't be there waiting for the gods. Okay, moving on. We're going to Babylon. So, the dynasty of Orphals and the most powerful ruler of Babylon is Hammurabi. And Hammurabi is known for his law code. His stele that presents a law code and a law of order. You have a system of crime and punishment outlined by his code, as well as a representation of Hammurabi. His empire begins quite small, so Babylon begins as in a relatively small area, and then begins to expand quite dramatically around the Euphrates, and by 1750 BC, so by the end of his rule, it's extended quite a bit. Okay, Code of Hammurabi. Here we go. So the Code of Hammurabi, if we look at the stele, you can see that it's another work of art that could be and would have been placed in a public location. It's a stele, just like Naram Sin that we saw in last lecture. In this stele, you can see Hammurabi here on the top, standing in close connection to Shamash, the sun god. The law code is down below. So all of this right here is written, which tells us about what the crime and punishment would have been. For example, you would have, like we heard Sierra say, slap your dad, cut off your hands. Or, it'd be like an eye for an eye system. So if you poke someone's eye out, your eye gets poked out too. Seems pretty fair. If you steal from the temple, and remember, at these temples, people are making donations, extensive offerings to these temple complexes. So if you steal from the temple, you will be put to death. There are crimes for adultery, where there are laws for how to handle a woman's dowry. So all of this is outlined here down below in his code, which is written in a cuneiform script, but in the Akkadian language. All right, I'll let you guys finish writing, because we have another clip. But this thing's really intricate if you really looked at it, the pictures in the book and stuff. Just the writing itself.
Didn't the book mention something about, like, the height of the two?
What do you mean? The height? Oh, yeah, the height of Hammurabi compared to the god, right? Yeah, so you would see that the god is, if he'd stand up, he'd be so much taller than Hammurabi. And this is, the purpose of this was for Hammurabi to kind of humble himself, Okay. Can I put on the clip? Wait another minute? Okay.
Do you think for, like, more of a modern time?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's say you, like, scratch on the spot.
I mean, that kind of sounds like a favor, but yeah, it could be. What else we got? Sierra, yeah.
So is it
Yeah, you choke them out. Yeah. Good one. Like you don't choke them like with the hand. I think you make them choke on a French fry as well. That's how I would see it. All right. So the Ishtar Gate, or Ishtar Gate, was constructed by the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar in the second. Nebuchadnezzar the second. It was the eighth gate of the kingdom of Babylon, and served as the entrance to the city. This gate was part of the king's plan to beautify the empire, the capital, and its cities. This gate is so well known that it was on the initial list of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. And here you could start seeing, obviously, advances in color. So this is like a brilliant blue. These Babylonians kind of got the hint from Egyptians about copper and started using copper on their bricks. So all of that blue is actually copper, which is probably oxidized. Hi. And then we see 3 different species of animals also on the gate. We see a type of lion, a type of, I believe they said oxen. I don't want to be wrong. And a tiger. You sacred animals for the chief of God. So having these animals on the gate would kind of be a symbol of protection. You know, they wouldn't, people who came to this place would be very intimidated. It was meant to intimidate. All right. So the Towers of Babel. In the Bible, the Tower of Babel is a structure built in Babylon. The story of its construction appears to be an attempt to explain the existence of the diversity in human languages. According to Genesis, the Babylonians wanted to make a name for themselves by building a mighty city and a tower with its tops to the heavens. God disrupted the work by confusing the language of the workers, that they could no longer understand each other. The city was never completed, and the people were dispersed over the face of the earth. So this here obviously is just somebody's reconstruction of it, their own interpretation of what it might have looked like. But most likely back in those days, it didn't look like this, but it looked more of a ziggurat. Okay. And then lastly, we're going to wrap up chapter 2 on Assyrian art. All right, so moving on to the Assyrian period, the Assyrian Empire becomes much larger than the Babylonian and the Neo-Sumerian areas. It dominates the whole area around the Mesopotamian region, and it also starts moving on to Egypt, or into Egypt. So moving into areas that previous Near Eastern dynasties or empires never reached. Assyrians take their name from Ashur, which is their city named after their god. Assyrians were known for their extensive citadels. So here is one example of the major citadel. It's the citadel of Sargon II. It's located in current-day Iraq. Let's see. A number of rulers built citadels that had extensive fortifications. They were often raised so that you would have a view, and you would also know if anyone is coming from that view. Extensive gateways. So those who would visit the citadels would move through these gateways. In the citadels, there were bureaucratic offices for managing the empire. There were audience halls, throne areas for the ruler. So like I mentioned, One example would be Sargon II. One of the things that was discovered at the Citadel of Sargon were these, right here, lamases. So these figures that essentially guarded the gates. You would walk past them, you would move into the structure, presumably they were meant to be intimidating. You can tell that they have these extensive stylized features such as beards, human faces, wings, but they also have a bull's body. All right.
It wouldn't really that the idea. Get the human head on the bull's body.
We talked about it last week.
Isn't that a stadium?
No.
It's a room.
A what?
A standing rock.
No. Kylie.
Is it like the main room in the temple?
Yeah, it's the room on top of the temple, on top of a ziggurat, and it's usually where people would wait for their god to appear to them. All right, good job. So what was the purpose of the talismar figures? Remember them from last week? There were multiple of them. Alex, you want to tackle that one? Yeah. Yeah, so here, let's go back in time. These are the talismar figures, remember? And they kind of represented worshipers, right? Okay. So we talked about the code of law, the Hammurabi's law code. What culture does that come from? So remember we talked about Sumerian, Babylonian. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, it's Babylonian. We just gotta remember which works of art come from which culture in the Near Eastern part of the world. Megan, correct? Okay. Who could tell me what theocratic socialism is? Yeah, go ahead, Kylie.
Was it kind of like where the temple was kind of in charge of distributing agriculture and sort of the center of the society?
Yes. Yes, but in return, the temple gives, but also people have to give. Right, like their offerings and stuff like that. Their prayers. Good. What does the name Sargon mean? Yeah?
Like Turkey.
Yeah, exactly that. All right, let's do. Yeah. Let's do. Now, this one is a little bit of a trick question. All right. What group of people. So, think back to the beginning of the lecture last week. What group of people mastered interrogation techniques to exploit the river from better crops? Yeah.
You mean irrigation?
What did I say?
Interrogation?
That's Hammurabi, right? You took it. Okay, yeah. Go ahead. Okay. Yeah, you're not half wrong. But technically, it was the Neolithic people. Because they stopped being nomadic, remember, and started settling down. But then we had the Sumerians come in, and they kind of perfected it by living between, the two rivers, their fertile soil, they developed all these channels and irrigation systems, not interrogation. uh, where is my mind? But who invented writing? What group of people? Yeah. The Sumerians, correct. Good. I think you guys are pretty set. This was a fun chapter, right? We see a lot of evolution, in building and art. Okay, so homework for Thursday. Start reading chapter 3. Okay, this is more of an assignment for the weekend. I really, get chapter 3 done over the weekend because it is a bulky chapter. But if you're going to start reading, don't read past the New Kingdom. And then today we already have quiz 2 is unlocked, and it's going to be due by Friday on midnight. Okay, so those are the only 2 things I am requiring. Discussion boards. I know that I was going to talk about having a concrete date on that. I think I'm going to get rid of discussion boards for chapter 1 and 2. So don't think about that right now. That's not happening. It'll happen possibly in chapter 3 because it is a more condensed chapter. Okay, any questions before we go? No? Okay, guys. Good class.